Welcome in, everyone. Ready for another deep dive. Today we're taking on Andrew Kagan's Random Technical News You Can Possibly Use, the one from January 31st, 2025. He covers so much Azure, Microsoft 365, AI, security. It's like drinking from a fire hose.
Yeah, it's a lot, but it's really the best way to get a sense of where everything is headed, all the latest developments.
Exactly. So we're going to try to break it down and make sense of it all. Let's start with Azure, shall we?
Sounds good.
One thing that really stood out to me in DocumentDB going open source. I mean, wow. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it's a pretty big deal, right? I mean, DocumentDB is a core part of Azure, and now Microsoft's basically saying, come on in, everyone, let's build this together.
It's almost like they're saying, hey, we trust the community to help us make this even better.
Right. And it could really shake things up for companies that are still holding onto proprietary database solutions. It's going to be interesting to see how they adapt.
Fascinating, for sure. Now, there was another Azure update that caught my eye, DeepSeek R1, remember that?
Oh, yeah, that was a big one.
Now it's available on Azure AI Foundry and GitHub. Help me out here. Why is this so important?
Well, DeepSeek R1, it's a really powerful AI model, and now it's super accessible for developers on Azure.
And on GitHub too, right? So anyone can use it and tinker with it.
Exactly. So you can imagine all sorts of possibilities, from natural language processing to image recognition, and it's all backed by Microsoft's cloud, which is a pretty big deal.
Right, and we talked about DeepSeek before, how it could revolutionize healthcare, remember?
Oh, yeah, for sure. Like faster diagnoses, personalized treatments, all that. It's pretty amazing to think about.
It is. So Azure's clearly making some big moves, but what about Microsoft 365? Anything interesting happening over there?
You bet. A lot of the updates this week are all about AI and collaboration. One that really stood out, you can now build custom engine copilots using Teams' AI library and Azure AI Studio.
Copilots, you mean like AI assistants?
Yeah, but the cool thing is you can customize them for specific tasks within Microsoft Teams. Oh, wow. So you could have one that helps you schedule meetings, another one that drafts emails, another one that summarizes those crazy long conversations.
Exactly.
It's like having a whole team of AI helpers.
Right. I think a lot of people would love that.
It would definitely make my life easier. And, it's not just about saving time. It's about freeing up your mental energy to focus on the stuff that really matters.
Absolutely. Like, imagine AI handling all those routine tasks so you can focus on being creative and strategic, really thinking about the big picture.
Love that. AI is a partner, not a replacement. Now let's switch gears a bit and talk about Power Platform and Dynamics 365. What's going on in that world, according to Andrew Kagan?
This week, the focus seems to be on automation and security. Power Automate's got some cool new features, like this thing called a super connector, basically. Lets you connect to all sorts of apps and systems, even the ones that don't have native APIs.
So you can automate tasks across different platforms, even if you're not a coding whiz. Exactly. And the January update for Power Automate for desktop, that's all about streamlining the automation process, making it super easy to build and manage workflows.
It sounds like Power Platform is really focused on giving users more control and flexibility. And what about security? Any updates on that front?
Definitely. There are new features for desktop flows that are all about boosting security, protecting identities, secrets, your whole desktop infrastructure, all that good stuff.
So it's not just about automating everything. It's about doing it securely, right?
Absolutely. You got to have both.
Okay, let's move on to something a little different. DevOps and SRE. Andrew Kagan always has something interesting to say about that world, especially since it's constantly changing.
It is. There's this article he highlighted that asks, is Jenkins still worth learning for DevOps in 2025? Which is kind of a provocative question, right?
Yeah, it makes you wonder, man. I mean, Jenkins has been around forever, but new tools are popping up all the time.
It has. And the article makes some good points about needing to stay current,
Well,
seeing if there might be something better out there.
Right. You can't just rely on what worked 5 years ago. You got to keep learning.
Exactly. Now, speaking of keeping up with the latest and greatest, there's some news about WebAssembly, or WASM. You familiar with that?
Vaguely. It's got something to do with running different programming languages in web browsers, right?
Yep. And Spin 3.0, this framework for building serverless applications, has embraced WebAssembly. It's pretty cool.
So developers have more options now. They're not limited to just one language.
Exactly. And there's more. WASM Spin and SpinCube, they both use WebAssembly, and they've just been accepted into the CNCF sandbox.
CNCF sandbox, that's a good thing, right?
Oh, yeah. It's a big deal. It means they're seen as promising, innovative projects that could really shape the future of cloud computing.
Very cool. Okay, I think we've covered a lot of ground here. Azure, Microsoft 365, Power Platform, and a little bit of DevOps. Let's take a break here, and we'll come back and tackle the rest of Andrew Kagan's insights in part 2.
All right, ready to jump back in? Let's talk about data, analytics, and AI. It's always something new happening in that world.
For sure. And after all that talk about AI in the last part, I'm really curious to hear more. Those custom copilots, that sounds amazing.
Yeah, they're pretty cool.
But I gotta admit, those AI agents, they still kind of feel like science fiction to me.
It does sound futuristic, doesn't it? But, they're becoming more and more advanced. Like, there was this one example in the newsletter, a project management assembly built with agent.ai.
Oh, yeah, I remember seeing that.
So it uses multiple AI agents, right? And they each have their own specialty, like different project tasks, and they actually collaborate and make decisions together.
So it's like having a team of AI project managers. I mean, can they really do that?
They can. They communicate with each other. They share information. They even adapt based on how the project's going. It's pretty incredible, actually.
That's wild. Makes you wonder where the limits are with AI,
It's a good question, for sure. And, speaking of pushing those limits, there's also news about OpenR1. Remember DeepSeek R1, the AI model we talked about earlier?
Yeah, the one that's now available on Azure.
Well, OpenR1 is a full reproduction of that, and it's been released as open source.
Wait, so the whole code for that powerful AI is out there for anyone to use?
Pretty much. Developers, researchers, anyone can study it, change it, build on it. It's a big step towards making AI more transparent and collaborative.
That's pretty amazing. So instead of just a few companies controlling everything, now everyone can contribute.
Exactly. It's like democratizing AI, right? And, speaking of collaboration, there's this article about DevOps and SQL and Fabric.
SQL and Fabric, that's for data stuff, right?
Yeah, it's a platform for data engineering and analytics. And the article is all about bringing DevOps principles into that world.
DevOps.
Yeah.
Isn't that more for software development?
It is, but the core ideas of DevOps, like collaboration, automation, continuous improvement, they actually apply to data, too.
So you can use those same principles to manage data better, make it more secure, all that.
Exactly, which is becoming super important because everyone's relying on data more and more these days.
Makes sense. Okay, we've covered a lot on data and AI, but there's one more area I want to touch on: security, compliance, privacy, all that.
Yeah.
Especially with all the cyber attacks happening, it's definitely on my mind.
Yeah, it's a big concern, and there's a lot happening in that space, too. One thing that caught my eye in the newsletter was about a new ransomware attack. This one targets VMware ESXi hosts.
Ransomware?
Mm.
That's always scary to hear about. How does this one work?
It's pretty sneaky, actually. It uses SSH tunneling, so it can fly under the radar. Basically, the attackers create this hidden back door into the VMware host.
And these hosts are used a lot for virtualization, right?
Yeah, exactly. So once they're in, they can deploy ransomware, encrypt all the data, and basically hold the whole organization hostage.
Yikes. It's like a sneak attack, waiting for the right moment to strike.
It is. So it's really important for organizations to be proactive about security, Strong access controls, multi-factor authentication, intrusion detection, all that's critical.
Sounds like a never-ending battle.
It kind of is, but there is some good news, too. The newsletter mentions that almost half of CISOs now report directly to CEOs.
So cybersecurity is finally getting the attention it deserves at the top level.
It seems that way. It means CISOs have more influence, more resources to implement strong security measures.
That's good to hear.
Yeah.
But, with all this talk about cyber attacks and data breaches, it can feel overwhelming. What can people do to stay safe online?
It's a good question. I think the most important thing is to be aware of social engineering tactics, like those phishing emails and scams that try to trick you into giving up information.
Right. Those are getting more sophisticated, too.
They are. But if you understand how they work, you're less likely to fall for them. Think critically, don't click on suspicious links, double-check everything before you share personal details.
Good advice. It's a reminder that we all have a responsibility to protect ourselves online.
Exactly. Security is a team effort.
All right, I think we've done a pretty good job covering data, analytics, and security.
Yeah, we hit a lot of the key points.
So let's move on to the next section, where we'll talk about learning and certifications, which is super important for anyone who wants to stay ahead in this crazy tech world.
All right, so let's shift gears a bit and talk about learning and certifications.
Yeah, this is always a hot topic, right? Especially with tech moving so fast.
Yeah.
Got to stay ahead of the curve.
Definitely. And Andrew Kagan has some good resources highlighted this week. Like there's Azure Masterclass V3 Part 4. This one focuses on resiliency.
Oh, yeah, that's a big one. Building systems that can bounce back from anything.
Exactly. And for anyone who's just getting started with API security, there's a great course on the fundamentals.
Fundamentals are always good, right? Got to build that strong foundation.
They are. Now, if you're really interested in diving deep into LLMs, large language models.
Yeah, those are all the rage right now.
There's a really cool course on building a semantic book recommender. Uses Python, OpenAI, LangChain, and Gradio.
Sounds intense.
Yeah.
But I bet it's a lot of fun for the right person.
Definitely. Okay, now for the last section, industry news and trends. And as you might expect, AI is still the big story.
It seems like it's always AI these days. But what else is there?
Well, we talked about DeepSeek R1 coming to Azure, right? But I think it's worth emphasizing just how big of a deal that is.
Okay, yeah, let's break that down a bit more.
So Microsoft's making this powerful AI model more accessible, right? And that could really accelerate innovation across all sorts of industries.
Like healthcare, right? We talked about that earlier.
Exactly. Faster diagnoses, personalized treatments, we could see real breakthroughs there. But also in other areas like natural language processing, computer vision, even drug discovery.
It's amazing to think about. So what other AI news is out there?
Well, there's this interesting development with OpenAI. They've launched ChatGPT Gov. It's basically their chatbot, but specifically for government use.
A chatbot for the government?
Mm.
That's kind of wild. What's the purpose of that?
Well, OpenAI is saying they want to show how AI can improve government services, make things more efficient. Think about citizen engagement, data analysis, even policy development.
Wow, AI writing policies. I mean, it's fascinating, but also a little scary, right?
Yeah, there are definitely some concerns there, like transparency, bias, making sure AI is used ethically.
Right. Those are big questions.
They are. And, speaking of the AI landscape, there's a new player making some noise. A company called Moonshot has released an AI model called Kimi K1.5.
Kimi K1.5, never heard of it.
Well, they're claiming it outperforms OpenAI in some areas, specifically natural language understanding and generation.
So it's a direct challenge to OpenAI, basically. Interesting.
It is. It'll be interesting to see how it all plays out.
Yeah, I mean, competition is usually a good thing, right? Pushes everyone to innovate.
Exactly. But I know what you're thinking. What does all this mean for the average person, right?
Yeah, that's the big question. How will all this AI stuff actually affect our lives?
That's a good question. Well, I think we can expect AI to become even more integrated into everything we do, like the apps we use, how we interact with businesses, all that.
So more automation, more personalization, maybe AI helping us make decisions?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's exciting, but also a little bit daunting, right?
It is. But like you said earlier, I think staying informed is key.
Yeah.
Being aware of the potential benefits and the risks.
Absolutely. And being part of the conversation, making sure AI is developed and used responsibly.
Well said. I think that's a great note to end on. We've covered a lot of ground today, from the nitty-gritty of Azure updates to the big picture trends in AI and everything in between.
It's amazing how much Andrew Kagan packs into these newsletters, isn't it?
It is. And I think we did a pretty good job breaking it all down, making it digestible.
I think so, too.
So to all our listeners, thanks for joining us on another deep dive. Keep exploring, keep learning, and we'll see you next time.